Hello viewers, I hope you are fine and really doing well in your life. Now let's get started with our next lesson of U.A.E SST for grade 8, American Civil War and Reconstruction. So here we have the warm up and activity 1 exercise from the textbook. Please go through. Please subscribe to my channel. So let me just proceed further. The war with Mexico. Mexico became independent from Spain in 1821. In 1824, the Republic of Mexico began to strengthen its ties with its territories to its north. This included Texas, New Mexico, and California. However, California split off from Mexico and became an independent republic in 1848. Later, California joined the U.S. as a state. So Mexico was colonized by Spain, but they won their independence in 1821. They became a republic. That is, in 1824, they started running the country on the basis of the constitution framed by them. So that is the meaning of republic. And this included the regions of Texas, New Mexico, and California. However, California was not so inquisitive to be at the side of Mexico, so it became an independent republic in 1848 and joined the United States as its state. Now, conflicts between the Mexicans and the Americans for the control of American Southwest resulted in a 2-year war. And this was a war which was fought between these two countries, basically for the Southwest region. And the war ended when the Americans became victorious. They entered the city of Mexico. So the Mexicans had to surrender in 1848. The United States forced the Mexicans to give away the territories of New Mexico and Arizona. So, with the addition of the Mexican territories, the United States extended itself right from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. The American Civil War. The American Civil War was fought for many reasons, including slavery and economics. The industrial North relied, the industrial North was dependent on the paid labor and the manufacturing center of the United States. The agricultural South relied on large number of enslaved people to produce cotton as the most important cash crop of the time. So when I say cash crop, it means that it gives you instant cash. The crops which were in great demand during that time in America was cotton. In Asian history, if you read, you come to know that the cash crops were like cotton, tobacco, indigo. So these were the cash crops which gave instant cash to the farmers. So over here you have the scenario in which the northern region of America was completely industrialized, but they did not have the farmlands producing cotton. Whereas the southern region had no mills, no factories, but they were the manufacturers or they were the farmers who were producing cotton, growing cotton. Now over here, the cotton gin. This was the machinery which was invented by Eli Whitney in 1821, and this made the cotton cloth cheaper and faster to produce. Now we will see cotton gin and the usefulness of it in the later slide. Most of the cotton was woven on power looms in the north, not in the south where the cotton was grown. Southern states wanted to sell their cotton to foreign countries which would pay more than the factory owners in the northern states wanted to pay. So over here there was a difference of opinion wherein the southern states wanted no more to sell their cotton to the northern states because they were buying it very cheaply, and they wanted to sell it to the foreign nations, their raw cotton, so that it could fetch them a good price. They also wanted that the new territories to adopt this slavery based system rather than the paid based system which was existent in the north. So again there was a differences of opinion. and it was that the southern people wanted slavery based system because they had this large number of slaves, and those slaves were helping them in the production of cotton in the southern region. So they wanted that same slavery based system to be existent in Northern America. Whereas in Northern America, their ideology was that they did not favor a slavery based system, but they wanted paid labor based system which was existent over there. Some states in the south wanted to cede or stop being the part of United States. Therefore, on February 4th, 1861, seven states met and they formed a confederate, that is the association, and the Association of the States of America, declaring Jefferson Davis as their president. Other states later joined in to make a total of 13 states. For some, the American Civil War was fought to keep the United States together more than to free the enslaved people. So everybody was only thinking in terms of their personal reasons, and over here nobody cared for the slaves and their exploitation. So they just wanted that United States should be together, and with this purpose only they fought the war. Now, President Abraham Lincoln. The North was richer and had a population of 22 million, while the South had a population of about 9.5 million. About one third of the population of the South were enslaved people and would not be expected to fight. So over here you can see again the difference between the northern states of America and the southern states of America. In the northern state they were a richer lot. Why they were a richer lot? Because obviously they were industrialized, whereas the southern region had the primary occupation as farming, and they were the northern Americans were into secondary occupation, and that was industries. If you look at the world and the economies of the world, you will understand that those countries who are a very prosperous nation are actually an industrialized nations, and they have their main occupation as like manufacturing, whereas those countries which are still following the traditional occupation of farming are those countries which are not that prosperous and they are backward. So they are the ones who are providing the raw materials to the industrially sound rich nations. So this was the main big difference of money, you can say, or of wealth, you can say. Second thing was the population. Also, the population of the north was fairly good than that of the south. So they had a huge, big population. And the third thing is that in the south, more of the enslaved people were residing. So obviously, they won't fight for the nation or for the good of the people. Abraham Lincoln was elected as president in 1861 and he was committed to keeping the country together. The North expected the war would be won quickly, but soon it became clear that the new weapons and warfare practices on land caused terrible losses of men and supplies. Both sides became overburdened with trying to get supplies, medical care, and more soldiers to fight in the war. Both the North and the South drafted new troops. That means that they recruited new troops into the army. A draft is a requirement of men to serve in the army. So they did that. So as the war progressed, they brought in more and more soldiers. They recruited more and more people into the war. And both the sides terribly suffered. Why? Because of the overburdening of the various, like there was a shortage of supplies, medical care, more soldiers fighting and getting killed, and or some getting badly injured. So both the sides were facing terrible losses. North expected that the war would end quickly, but that expectation was not at all right and on their part of thinking so. So some freed African Americans became inspirational leaders. The former slave and self-educated African American Frederick Douglass had a number of meetings with President Lincoln. This is activity 2, very much from your textbook. Please go through. And this is again activity 2 continued. Please go through. Activity 3 from the textbook itself. Please see. The Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 and the end of the Civil War. Emancipation is freedom. Proclamation is announcement. So the Freedom Announcement of 1863 and the end of the Civil War. The document that abolished or cancelled slavery in the United States was called as Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 and was issued on 1st January 1863. It was delayed by Lincoln for more than a year, but the practical need for more soldiers made it necessary. That means that they wanted more soldiers to join the Union Army. So they had taken into consideration all those freed slaves. So the freed slaves joined in the Union Army. Soon, the African American battle units were formed within the Union Army. But just as the war ended, Lincoln was assassinated. He was killed. He was murdered while watching a theatrical play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Lincoln's death created a crisis of leadership over what should take place after the war as Northern Union troops occupied the defeated Confederate lands of the South. So many people started considering that several million freed soldiers were to be considered as citizens. So they had a doubt over here. So whether these freed soldiers would be recognized as citizens of America or not after when the Union troops had taken over the regions of the Confederate lands of the South. Activity 4 from the textbook, please go through. Cotton production in the 1800s. In the 1800s, cotton was grown on large southern plantations. Cotton is the part of the plant that has the seeds. That's very true. That the cotton flower has got many seeds inside, and these seeds must be removed before the cotton could be made into yarns or into a thread. So it's not only the flower which you get, and that after picking up the flowers, it can just be processed into yarns, and the yarns can be intertwined and made into a fabric or a cloth. No, it's a long process. So first of all, it should be removed. The seeds should be removed. Otherwise, the it would hinder the production of the yarns. Then picking out of these small seeds of the cotton plant was extremely time consuming. With the cotton gin, which was invented by Ali between 1821, cotton production was made faster and more efficient. So the work which you do by hand and the work which is done by machines, there's a large difference. With machines, it goes faster and it's not tedious task also. You do it, it's not boring, you do it very fast. So the cotton gin could be attached to a power source, to an electricity, to make the process even faster. The cotton gin had a device that could pull the cotton through the wire teeth. The seeds were caught by the teeth and pulled from the cotton fibers. By solving this tedious or a boring task and the time consuming problem of the cotton seeds. Now, when this was solved, the cotton gin made cotton extremely profitable. So, the manufacturing of the cotton yarns and then intertwined into a fabric went on at a very quick pace. Activity 5, very much from the textbook. Please go through. Now, America after the Civil War. How was the condition of Americans after that? So after the Civil War, the southern states reformed their state legislature and courts. So they underwent a reformation. The legislatures passed laws to prohibit or restrict African Americans from voting or having equal rights in the city. African Americans were not allowed to live in the same area or use the same facilities as others. African American children were sent to separate schools. So these were the three main things what you can see over here. The the injustice done or meted out to the African Americans. Firstly, the voting rights were taken away. Secondly, they couldn't live into the same neighborhood in which the Americans or the whites were living. And the facilities which were provided to others, they were not given those facilities. And the worst thing is that the children were sent to separate schools. So there was complete segregation from the grassroots level. After the Civil War, many African Americans moved out of the South into the northern cities. African Americans faced challenges in the North as well. Life was not that easy for these African Americans when they migrated from the South to the North. Sometimes they were paid less or not allowed to work in certain jobs paid. Second thing is that that means that after undergoing all these problems in the southern region, when they went to the northern region, they were paid less, or secondly, they were not allowed only to work in certain organizations. E.B. Du Bois was a sociologist and the first African American faculty member at the Harvard University. This particular person, he wrote many works on the problems and potential, that is the talent, the capability of the African Americans who moved into the northern cities. African Americans established their own colleges that were funded and cared for by their African Americans themselves. Out of these colleges emerged, came out a new generation of leaders in 1950s and in 1960s. So this was the best thing which we can see in this particular slide, something positive coming out for the African Americans. First of all, the prestigious Harvard University had employed this particular person, Du Bois, who was a sociologist and a first African American faculty member. And he was the one who wrote about the problems and the capabilities of the African Americans who were looked upon as a liability, but they were actually not a liability but a asset to the nation. Then these African Americans, they started funding and caring for their own colleges, and from these colleges you had a new generation of leaders coming out of it. Leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. raised awareness of the challenges of African Americans. During 1964 and 1965, laws were passed to protect the civil rights for all. Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated or he was killed in 1968. Immigration, which happened between 1870 and 1920. Immigration into the US was a major development in the country's growth and population throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries. So the main reason was immigration, and that led to the growth in the population. Difficult conditions in the other countries often led to the decision to immigrate to the United States. For example, now they have given us the example that who were those people who were forced to leave their nations and settle down in US. The Irish famine that ravaged Ireland between 1846 and 1850 forced several million Irish people to leave for the United States during the 19th century. Between 1836 and 1914, over 30 million Europeans immigrated to the United States. So this was the period of time wherein the people were facing problems in their own nation and they were forced to take this decision. Let us see the public schools and women's suffrage. In the 19th century, the public school system was established in the United States. Many students only received a grammar school education, that is a basic education. In the 1830s, Horace Mann emphasize the important principles in establishing a public school system up to the high school. Now, what were those important principles over here? Let us see one by one of Mr. Horace Mann. First is the public should be educated. That is very, very important for all the nations to have an educated lot. Second thing is that this education should be publicly supported and funded. And it should not be funded only by a particular group of people or organization. Thirdly, is that the public school should admit all the children from the variety of backgrounds. There shouldn't be any segregation that these are the African Americans and these are the whites. So only the whites should be given entry or admission in the schools. No. Next thing is that education must have well trained professional teachers. That is of utmost importance. If we have schools with untrained teachers, with not so educated teachers, then that is going to affect the knowledge and the development of the children. Education must include both, that is, the girls as well as the boys. There was also a gradual improvement in women's rights after the school reforms were done, that is, slowly and steadily, the new colleges for women were built. And in the 19th century, women worked mostly in the professions of teaching and nursing. So, mostly the girls took up these jobs as teachers and nurses. Women in America earned the right to vote, called the suffrage, in 1920. Why? Because women started getting education, they started becoming independent. So they started stressing the demand for equal rights, and the equal rights not only in other spheres but also in the political sphere. This is activity 6, very much from the textbook. Please go through. Activity 6 continued. Please go through.
So thank you so much for watching my channel on SST, and just signing off with a humble request to please subscribe if you haven't subscribed as yet. Press the bell icon for the notification of my latest videos. Share it with your friends, relatives and acquaintances so that they can get benefited by my videos. See you next time with my new video. Till then, take care. Bye bye.